Hello and welcome to Antidote with Rain Lawrence. I'm joined today by Genelva. Genelva's a doula, Reiki master, and intuitive aromatherapist, interesting, working out of Nottingham. Genelva has experienced a few miscarriages, and today she's going to share with us the different experiences she's had managing this event via industrial obstetrics in comparison to a more holistic and natural, without mainstream medicine option. So welcome, Genelva. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Sitting in
You're so
cold
welcome.
UK. Cold UK while you're in
Yeah, so
hot
it's
Jamaica.
hot Jamaica. It's the end of day for you, and it's about midday for me. So if you're flagging and you need to stop, just do let us know. And thanks so much for agreeing to share what can be quite a sensitive topic. I just want to let you know that, if you become emotional or you want to stop or you don't feel like sharing anymore, that's absolutely fine. It's not like you've made any commitment. So yeah, just be gentle with
Thank
yourself
you.
and yeah, do what you can to protect your energy. So we'll start. Your most recent miscarriage was earlier this month, am I right? Or
So it was, yes, it was this month, and it was very early. So I'd say probably about a week or two after ovulation. And to give a bit of context to, I generally can tell when I'm pregnant, and that is something that I've been able to hone into since becoming a Reiki practitioner. And I had all the symptoms, tiredness, and um, I felt the implantation, for instance.
wow.
And I think a lot of it, when it comes to miscarriages, is there's a lot that is controlled by our emotions, mind, not believing. And I think I've had pretty much 10 years of trying to conceive. So when I do find out that I'm pregnant, the way I think tends to almost bring the start of a miscarriage, if that makes sense.
So
And I'm
interesting.
working on that with Reiki, but also with womb healing.
Fantastic. So what struck me there about what you were talking about is sort of like the definition of pregnancy. So what would you, so is it basically like the minute that you conceive you can feel that energetically?
Yes, so it's happening a number of ways. So there's the physical feeling. So whether it's implantation and you physically feel tired or wanting to eat. But I have probably for the last sort of 5 years meditated to conceive, and done some really sort of deep diving sort of meditation. So for instance, one of my miscarriages, I was fully connected for probably about two weeks with my baby.
Wow.
And there was just a moment where I meditated, and I had this girl come up to me, and it was like, it's weird, but it was just we were among the stars basically, and she just said, "I'm not ready, I'm going." And I was like, "I've got you." Held onto her hands, and literally I woke up, and a few hours later I miscarried. And I spent the 2.5 weeks knowing I was pregnant, and that was probably one of the most recent where it was I got a positive test, and we went to the doctors, and we were about to go for a scan. So we knew, do you know what I mean? We've got the furthest we'd ever got. And actually I was fully committed to it, if that makes sense. I was fully aware, I knew, I was positive, but the message I got was just, "You're not ready, I'm not ready, and I've got to go." And yeah, and that's what happened. But I used Reiki for that, and that was pretty much probably about 6 months after I started my Reiki level 1. And my teacher said, it can help you to conceive. And it's definitely, it helped me to definitely sort of clear a lot of baggage, a lot of things you think or feel about pregnancy, the way I talk to myself actually about it as well. So yeah, that was my most recent. And then I had
Okay.
an
And would that be classed as a chemical miscarriage? And can you explain to
it
our listeners your understanding of this term? Because that was the first time I come across it, actually, a chemical miscarriage.
yeah, so that would be a chemical miscarriage, which I'm going to be honest with you, I find that really annoying.
It's not a nice word, is it? It's not a nice
I mean,
term.
it's a pregnancy, but it basically happens in the first 5 weeks of pregnancy. Embryos formed. They even say it's embedded in your uterus lining, so implantation has happened. But I think they call it chemical because it's probably not even begun to develop.
Right.
And they basically are so early they're not realized. And for instance, a lot of birthers, they become pregnant and they still drink and they still eat what they want to eat, they still do it, there's just no symptoms. But for me, most of my pregnancies, I've had the symptoms. I felt tired, I felt implantation. We might talk about it later, but like I used to feel it on a particular side of my body, but I realized that it was in the wrong location. But my body, because I'm so connected to it spiritually and intuitively, I knew when I was. So for it to be called chemical, it almost says it's not a real pregnancy. It is. It is.
Yeah, it's typical of the sort of medical jargon, which is really
Yeah.
dehumanizing and
You've just not
depersonalizing,
peed on a
isn't it?
stick. Just not peed on a stick, and
Mm.
your HCG levels are not high enough for they're not high enough for what they see as pregnancy, basically.
Yeah, but
But
that's
it's still a
very
pregnancy.
just, yeah, it's this whole thing of like, what's that word? Not objectifying, but like
There's a criteria. There's a
taking
criteria.
everything as, yeah, and not seeing it
Yeah.
holistically. So it's like, oh, your HCG level isn't high, so you can't be pregnant. But
Yeah.
that's just one tiny element,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's making me think about the fact that it's kind of almost twofold, isn't it, when you're a pregnancy? So you need to have fertilization occur and you need to have implantation occur, and then that will start the growth.
Yeah.
So have you felt, so you can feel it as early as the fertilization stage at times, or is it always the
Yes.
implantation that
I
gives you
would
the
say
pain?
yes. I can feel
Yeah.
the travel. And but definitely the implantation. But what I realized is that for quite a while, and this last one, the implantation happened at the base of my stomach. But previous to that, and just before the ectopic that I had in May this year, I was feeling it on the right hand side. So actually, every time I was pregnant previously, I think my pregnancies were actually implanting in my fallopian tube that I no longer have. And but when you have an ectopic, sometimes you miscarry naturally. Where the one in May I had that was there was slightly different circumstances. So yes, I felt the whole thing, and sometimes you question it, but if you really tune in, if you really work with your womb and your body, you can. And I think it was easier for me to do because I was consciously trying to conceive with my ex-partner. Where, like I say, some people they may want to conceive, but it just happens, and and you're just getting on with your sort of normal day.
Yeah, because with the chemical pregnancy, where it's happening very early in gestation, some women wouldn't even realize that they're pregnant and
No,
wouldn't
because it's
therefore
before. It's
acknowledge
usually
it.
before. It's usually just before, a week before, or just before, or just at the time that you have your missed period,
Okay.
basically. So it can be about sort of from that point to about 7 weeks, basically. And 7 weeks, I think they say 6 to 7 weeks. They can't always locate where baby is. So
It's fascinating when you speak about your experiences of like actually being visited by this. Do you use the term soul? Does it feel like a soul has entered and
it's
you're communing with that soul?
it's an energy, and there's two ways you connect with it. It's knowing something is actually within you. Anyone that's carried a child, just knowing there's a being within you. And there's also when you meditate, and everybody has a different outcome when it comes to meditating. But for me, and I can't say this happened. This is a normal occurrence. It was just an experience that I had. And with meditation, sometimes it's almost like it was a dream. like 2 weeks later, but the day after, it was real. And I essentially had somebody who in my heart was my child, and they said they're not ready, and I was like, baby, I've got you. And I went to hold them, and she just disappeared. And then the next day, you just link it to that whole experience, which was that I just miscarried. And I was always trying to tune into the sex of the child as well. I wasn't bothered, but I always was just like, and it was that particular pregnancy, which she would have been 2 years old now, and we didn't expect it either, because we were sort of on the brink, but we were just about to go through IVF, and it was 2 days before I was going to start the IVF process, and we found out we were pregnant. So, like, yeah, out of all of my miscarriages, that is just the golden one, where it was just we had a moment.
You felt connected to her.
Completely connected. Meditated every day, twice a day. Did Reiki once a day as well. And when you do that, when you meditate so consistently, you're on a different plane. You're on a different plane. You're on a vibration, because like what we do day by day is so low vibrational. When you meditate, it lifts you, so you can deal with all of that. But you get back, and you become addicted to it. So I'd like leave my partner watching TV and be like, I'm going to go and meditate for 3 hours. So it just, but I haven't done it for ages, most of you. But at that point, I was so connected with my body, so connected with my practice, that nothing else could get in the way. No drinking, I didn't go out and see people. And it wasn't because I was trying to restrict to get my body ready to have a child. I just wanted to focus on
desire,
me.
yeah.
And then it was that's it. And there's a song in my head. There's a garage song in my head. Exactly, it was.
I know the one. That'll be in the show notes, don't worry. Put the DJ set.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating that you mentioned IVF, because I was gonna ask about whether you've looked into reproductive technologies, and have you struggled with conception with multiple partners? So it's, and yes. Do you know where the difficulties are coming from? Is it a semen problem, or is it
it was, so their semen was fine. I would say it's 10 years. I had 2 partners within those 10 years, 5 years each. The first partner, I would say we probably weren't doing it at the right time, like before ovulation. We weren't doing that all the time. However, we were together for the 5 years. 3 of those we were trying to conceive. So I was put forward for IVF, because at some point it's got to take, and it wasn't taking at all. I hadn't even got pregnant. Get that
free on the NHS.
I did, yeah, but it was through persistence. I will say that now. The doctors didn't look at me and say, this is what you need to do. I did my research and realized after 3 years, maybe I should go down that route. At that time, I was sort of mid-30s, like just early to mid-30s. And to be fair, I wasn't as spiritual as I am now, and hadn't really thought about the interventions and it not being natural and organic. It was just like I wanted to have a child. And the process was not brilliant, because I also have when we did get to the point of them investigating why I wasn't conceiving, they said I had fibroids, and I had an operation, and they removed 1 of 2. And then there was a period of probably about 4 months. They didn't really give you any advice about what to do, but I'd say when they remove your fibroids, you've got to get going with having a child, because fibroids grow as we every time you have a period, the blood gives that fibroid life. So let's say they removed it, and then I might have had 4 months where I was just doing what I'm doing, just living life. So then the fibroid, or another one, grew. And with my second partner, when it came to the fact that after about a year we couldn't conceive, and I was like, look, I've been here before. Went back to the hospital in Sheffield, and they were like, you've got fibroids again. I'm like, well, sorry, but they removed them. They removed them like 2-3 years ago. Well, no, you've got new ones. And to be fair, I'm back here again. I've come out of my most recent relationship, and it really was down to all of this, but that's fine. And I'm under the care of Sheffield Hospital again, and they said there is another fibroid, which is now there's different locations these fibroids can be, but mine, the one I currently have, which is about 1.5 centimeters, is top of my uterus, which is like sort of like the golden place, the place that baby likes to implant.
Okay, so it's
this is what
possibly
they're
the
saying.
fertilization's happening. You have an egg, your partner's sperm's mobile and active,
That's
but
absolutely
the
fine.
implantation
It's the implantation.
is
You've got some annoying thing just not allowing it to kind of take. And also, if you think about it, and like, you know, this is just me intuitively tuning into this thing holds on to blood. It takes blood. And what does like baby need when it attaches to the uterus? It needs that blood, it needs that life force. So if you've got something next to it, this bully, just say no. And it's been there. It's going to drain it. It's not, you know, yeah, no amount of me having beetroot and whatever else I have to keep my uterus supple and ready. But that's not to say having fibroids, that's one thing to say you can't conceive. And that's the thing that I'm moving forward with now, that if I have this elective surgery again and decide to be as quick as I can with trying to conceive, that's one thing. But I might just have to, I'm ready to try and look at what I'm doing holistically, spiritually, to just make it happen. Because there's a lot of conditions that birthers have, where they say it's just impossible. I know someone that's got a heart-shaped uterus, you can't get pregnant. She's now got a 3-year-old. Do you know what I mean?
So it could be some sort of psychic or like subconscious blockage that's stopping it, rather than something physical.
And it's usually that. There's a lot of womb therapy, all about subconscious. It's all about previous life and our experiences. It's all about our ancestors, how we were brought up. There's loads.
Was there a genetic element to it? Like, has your mother or your grandmother had a lot of miscarriages?
It's a good question. It's something that I visited when I was going through this, when I was studying to be a doula. They both had ectopic. My mum had a miscarriage between me and my sister as well, which I think she was quite away in terms of how pregnant she was. And I think that happened to my grandma as well. So yes. But sometimes I wonder, you know, is this sort of a hereditary thing, or is this almost an experiential thing that we go through as women of colour? Does that make sense? Like,
like
how
an
we've been persecuted and
legacy
ancestral legacy, and also the things that we go through, and we just live our lives day by day. But I haven't given myself enough time to sit back and really focus in on that. But that is what I want to do in the new year, because I just don't think something like this is hereditary, because fibroids in particular, it's prevalent in women of colour, and they still don't know really why that is.
Interesting.
So yeah.
And so when you were speaking about the idea that one of your fibroids is in the spot where implantation could occur, did you ever think about or were you ever offered the like intravaginal IVF or abdominal IVF?
Yes. So this would be this would be 2 years ago. It was all happening that I was going to have IVS, and it would be going through a process, I think 2 weeks for them to take the egg, to take the egg and fertilize it, and then to do a vaginal implantation, basically. And it never happened because I conceived. And then after that, and it was at the height of sort of pandemic, and I rang to explain I was pregnant, but I didn't want to be taken off the list. And I was advised to come back to us when, you know, because some couples, obviously it's a positive thing, you keep going. And then I miscarried literally on Boxing Day. So I found out on the 20th of December, miscarried on Boxing Day, called them, and sorry, because this context the story, that's when they said, come back to us, because some couples want to try and conceive naturally. And I said, how long? They said, take your time. So we said, look, we'll take 6 months. And then when we got back in touch with them after 6 months, because nothing was happening, they were just like, oh, we've not got you on our books anymore.
Mm.
We haven't got a record of the
Administrative
conversation.
nightmare. Oh God,
We haven't
yeah.
got, and I'm like, am I going stir crazy? And I know my partner was sitting next to you, and I made this phone call. And to top that off, at that point, I think about 4 months after that, I had my, what they would say is your third miscarriage. And your third miscarriage, and again, through research, you can go to the doctors and basically get referred to the miscarriage unit. So they then support you through conception. Which I thought, God, with the IVF and that, I'm set. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
However, they don't, even though they're in the same room, ward, building, they don't work together. So the IVF decided that they needed to discharge me. So 2 years of getting to where I was with them to be basically referred to the miscarriage unit, which I've gone through a series of exams, including a balloon being put in my uterus to blow it up to see the makeup of my uterus, what's happening. And they've come back and basically said I've got another fibroid. But now I have to start the process again, if that makes sense.
Oh God, yeah, it's typical, isn't it? We were speaking just before I pressed record about the importance of when you're dealing with authorities and agencies to get like a paper trail almost, because yeah, if you say something on a phone call or in person, they can, they've got deniability there, haven't they? So
yeah, and everything I do, paper trail. This one time I thought they were really, really looking after 2 days into it, I would have been under their care for months. But for me, I've just realized I had to think about, how do I not be frustrated? How do I protect my energy and my emotions, and just realize that, it was during the height of the pandemic. There's so much going on. They were still offering service throughout the pandemic as well. And my phone call, it just wasn't notarized, and the person probably doesn't work there anymore. And it's just, typical things that happen in any service, but especially in the healthcare service. But it means that it threw me back, however many years.
Such a shame. I was really sorry
yeah.
about that. Have you looked at, well, two things actually, surrogacy, or whether do you know if you're a red mooner or a white mooner? I can never remember which is which, but it does have an impact on how fertile you are.
Okay, so red moon, white moon, haven't heard about that, so please tell me about that.
I'm just on Google. Hang on, I need an assistant to get all this in my earpiece.
And surrogacy, I'm giving myself another 2 years, and yes, I've thought about all of that. I've thought about I would be absolutely happy with surrogacy, adoption, fostering. I've always been like that, and actually that is something, when I was probably in my late teens, I had quite a few friends that got pregnant, and it was, we were scared. We were told by our parents, don't do it. I was told by my mother, do not get pregnant. And I used to, at that point, say, I'm never going to be pregnant. I would be happy to foster and adopt. And I hold on to that because that is how I spoke to myself then. It's almost like, when you talk to your higher self, I'd already spoken to my 40-year-old self as a teenager, fearful of not being in the situation that my friends were in. So I don't know if white moon or red moon at that, but I believe that that's what I'm trying to break, that I created almost my legacy in terms of childbirth. Surrogacy and everything else, I've never been opposed to it. I'm always for it, but I've almost given myself, I'm now 41, and I've given myself a few more years, and not because there's shelf life of, where because I am geriatric pregnancy. I was told that as well.
Not the G word, Genelva, not the G word.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I've got it as something to say to you, like these trigger terms, which is just like, what's wrong with you? Like, if it was 2 years ago, I'd be cool. I'm now in this basket of geriatric, and it's like, actually, what is geriatric? I'm a very fit, regardless of whether you go to the gym and all this stuff. It's just a term that almost dampens it puts pressure on what you're doing, and if you're able to do it in the right way.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, because I've digressed. The problem was the partners I was with, they didn't want to
Oh, they're
do
not
that.
up for surrogacy. Okay.
No, the first person, my first partner, just, I think I was too young to even consider it with him. I presented it to him, but it was just like, no, we'll keep going. Second, he's a bit older than me, but he's just like, even IVF for him was weird. He's just like, this is like just not natural. I'm like, it's not natural, no, but it's potentially the only way we've got. And when we got over that, when I talked to him about surrogacy, it's just like, well, it's not going to be my child. And actually, he didn't want to adopt or foster, which is not the reason that our relationship broke down. But I just felt like I just needed to be with somebody. It's hard because it's like, I don't know, just need somebody that would look at all the options that you had if you didn't have any. But at the same time, I had to appreciate where he's coming from.
Of course, yeah. Everybody has their own perspective on it, and I'm kind of, because I haven't had to really I don't know what the term is, but I haven't really had to choose one, whether I feel okay with it or not. But I do feel like I worked in a fertility treatment clinic for a couple of weeks as part of my training, and there was something that didn't sit very well with me. But then I haven't had trouble conceiving, so it's very easy for somebody who hasn't struggled to get pregnant to say, oh, it's unnatural and it shouldn't be, not having that lived experience of the strong desire to be a mother and not being able to do that without assistance. So yeah, I'm kind of very open to however
I'm
people
open.
feel.
I'm very practical about it, and this is why I became a doula as well. I wanted one, but I was like, actually, I would love to support people like me because I haven't had that. I've worked through it very well. I have my crap days, but I have days where I'm just like, that's all I want to do is to not to pass on my experiences, because I would never do that really. And this is probably one of the first times that I've spoken about what I've been going through. Almost sort of said, I didn't want to put it on my profile, my page, but at the same time, what I've been through over the last 6 months, I definitely want to offer that as a service as well. So to support people that are trying to conceive, have conceived, and also those that have found that pregnancy just hasn't gone the way they've wanted it to go, to support them to get pregnant and next time. So
yeah, I think that's really important work, because I mean the NHS and mainstream maternity care isn't doing a lot of things right, but certainly when it comes to losses and bereavement, I think that's an area that's really
you get popped out the door, the same door you came in. You don't even get a leaflet anymore.
Sometimes there's not even a specific room for you, so you're there with all the new mums.
Oh, I've got stories, I can tell you. I've got stories.
Yeah, in fact, so coming on to that, so some healers think about abortions in a sort of paradigmatic way of like, on the one hand, there's medical or physical abortions, which are managed via like procedures or administration of drugs. And then on the other side, there's like the psychic abortion, whereby the pregnancies, which sounds like you've got more experience with, pregnancies terminated via like sort of psycho-spiritual commune with the soul or the fetus. Do you feel that that's a correct dichotomy to have? And do you feel that you can have both, or that one's preferable, or what are your thoughts on that?
I had both. I think the preferable one is the one where you've got the control over it. I wouldn't even say control, but it's just a natural, organic episode or happening. Like I said before, I knew I was pregnant, and I also knew when the miscarriage came. And I think I've definitely, I know I've had two where I didn't even need to have the positive pregnancy test. I just knew the makeup of the miscarriage. Like, I just knew what had happened. My first one, actually, I didn't know. Gosh, this was in my 20s. And I must have been about 3 months. I just didn't know. And I'd gone to a party, really tired, came back home, and I miscarried for 2 days. And it was so bad. I had to cook on my knees. I still remember. I don't know how I did it, but I had to cook food, and I was living with two flatmates who were both away. And it took 2 days. So luckily, the process what my body was going through in the evening, it gave way, and I slept. And then 9 o'clock, got woken up, and then I had to, without going into too much detail, but sitting on the toilet passed, and I was just like, what is that? And went through the process of looking, researching, and one of my flatmates came back, and exactly the same thing had happened to one of her friends. And what that was actually was a very, very spiritual miscarriage, because I was with somebody that would have been a partner for life. But I knew in myself that he wouldn't have wanted to be pregnant. And I remember he was away with his dad, and when he came back, he thought, I wouldn't want that child anyway. And I couldn't, we split quite soon after, because I just thought his reaction wasn't, how are you? It was dire. And I think about it, I'll never forget the experience. And it was the cooking on my knees. I couldn't even stand up. I didn't even think, weirdly, I didn't think to call, to call 999. I felt in control. I felt like it just, and it did feel like I was giving birth to something. I can't explain it, because it's never happened to me, but it did feel like that. But there was no point where I was like, I don't feel in control of my body and what I'm doing. Does that make sense? This is before, years before I even connected with my body spiritually, and just got to what I would see as now a spiritual Genelva.
I guess it's similar to birth and pregnancy in that sense, whereby it happens naturally and beautifully, and it works when it's undisturbed. So I guess a miscarriage should be the same and can be the same in certain circumstances, but I guess the fact that it is I hate the word failure, but it's almost what's the word, pathological, in that it's a pregnancy that doesn't get to a labor and the delivery of an infant. So I guess it's always dragged into that obstetric idea, because it's not normal, it's not what we were expecting or desiring. So I assume you've experienced both industrial obstetric care during a miscarriage and in perfectly alone independent care, like this one you mentioned. And have you ever had professional care for a miscarriage that wasn't mainstream and that was more like doula care?
So I haven't had doula care, but my topic in May, that involved being in the hospital, being under the care of the hospital, and I would say the care was 50-50, and I had to take a drug to abort it after probably about 4 weeks, three weeks of hoping that it may have been a misdiagnosed ectopic, which is always a possibility. And I had to take methotrexate, which is an anti-cancer drug, but it also plummets your cancer-reducing drug. It plummets your folic acid as well. So once you've taken it, there's like a 3 or 4 month period where you just should not conceive, because there's reports of obviously baby not developing in the right way. A lot of it is protection, which is one of the I'm going to say this. One of the GPs said to me, "You can get pregnant tomorrow, but it just protects the hospital that we say 3 months." Because this, after obviously going through this process and being told I've got to wait 3 to 4 months to then try and conceive, and then be careful. So to wait even longer, I think one of the nurses said 6 months. I'm just like, no, I can't wait 6 months. I haven't got that time. But one of the GPs did say it really is just to
cover themselves if you did conceive and there were I guess it would be like fetal abnormalities from that.
Exactly.
They can say, well, we told you not to get pregnant so soon.
Exactly. And I would say that's the process I went through. The 50-50 was they were supportive, but everything they gave you, the information they gave it for you to make a decision. I questioned everything. You know, I asked if I could have an elective surgery because the point was that they could not see the pregnancy. And they basically said that it wasn't a, what do they call it? This is not a real pregnancy. And but at the same time, they did not want to go forward for elective surgery. They would rather do the surgery if it was an emergency, which it turned out to be, because methotrexate, I think it's something like the 70% chance when you have the first injection, it works. And I think you can have up to 2. So the first week I had, the first lot I had was about a week, and they kept an eye on my HCG levels. I went pretty much every other day, for blood tests. And
okay,
then
so you were at home for a large part of it.
I was
or were
at
you
home. Yes, I
admitted?
wasn't in the hospital. I was the outpatient. Sorry, an outpatient, which most people, unless you're in really, like, because I wasn't in any pain as well. I felt there was an ache on my side, my right side, but I just thought just implantation, it's baby growing. But that was essentially pregnancy. A baby was growing in my fallopian tube.
And how many weeks was this? Was it quite an early?
I was 6.5 weeks when I just started to sort of bleed a bit, and then I had a really good nurse who just like, with your history, we're going to send you straight to hospital, which doesn't always happen for a lot of people. I tell you, there's a really good misdiagnosed ectopic pregnancy Facebook page, which was like my go-to, and it was such an amazing community. And there are some ectopics that actually do become, they end up being true, real pregnancies. It's just they cannot see the baby, or for some miraculous reason, baby moves. Baby can be in completely different places as well, and implant in completely different places apart from the uterus. And so I was holding on to that. And I've completely digressed. What was I saying?
So this was about the methotrexate and being an outpatient.
Yeah, so it was being an outpatient, but I had to basically go, and I was living 40 minutes from the hospital, so I had to go every other day. Hadn't told work, didn't want work to know what was going on, and that was probably about two weeks. And then I went back second week, and they were just like, it's not, your HCG levels are actually still going up, but they were still low enough for them to say it wasn't a true pregnancy. Essentially, I was still pregnant. It just wasn't based on the weeks. It didn't match what the criteria was of the HCG level. So they then said, do you want to, and it's the way they worded it, it's like, do you want to take another shot of methotrexate? It's not, we think you should. It's not, your life is in danger because of this. It's not, these are the statistics we have of women. There was absolutely nothing they could give me to say this is the right decision. I had to make the decision for myself, and holistically it just didn't sit well with me at all.
To take the second one.
It didn't sit well with me. And I also didn't feel like, some people that might think because they are worried about losing their life, because the next step was that I would rupture, and that's very life-threatening, internal bleeding. They can't always catch it. And I think at that point I'd probably been going to hospital for about 2.5 weeks every other day, 40-minute drive. Partner was working, so sometimes I had to do it myself. There was one day I was in hospital for about 6 hours, and there was a woman that I think was rupturing. They left her in a wheelchair. They just left her for someone to see her, but there was no one about, and she was in absolute agony. So when you talk about being in a space where there are women that or birth people that have had babies or pregnant, I saw it all. I was sitting in a waiting room with pregnant people, partners, knowing that I was losing mine. But the most harrowing was this woman and the crying. And I had to actually get up and say, I'm sorry, but she's in absolute agony. And because she was crying so much, they put her into one of the side rooms just to, so they didn't actually
so she
relieve
didn't
her in any
stress
way. They just put
everybody
her
else.
exactly. But yeah, I took the second, and that didn't work. I was in pain a week later. I thought it was just normal, but my
Were you
energetically
passing anything during this
no,
or
I
these 2
wasn't.
weeks?
It all
No.
started. I bled very lightly at 6.5 weeks and nothing else. I had a little bit of an ache on my right hand side, where the pregnancy was, where baby was, but I wasn't any pain. It was a second methotrexate and it hadn't even worked because they said you might be in pain, and that's why I just took the pain. But there was a day, the second day, I was just like, this doesn't feel right. And I took myself, I had my partner to take me into the hospital. And they scanned me. And I asked them a day before if they would scan me because there was something didn't feel right and they wouldn't. But this time around they did. It's almost like I walked in again a day later. Do you know what I mean? I'd already said to them, it was like red flags, I don't feel right. And they had me there for these 5 hours, seeing all this stuff. And actually, I think what happened is I ended up leaving because I was there for so long. I'd got to the end of my tether. Does that make sense? So I just left. The next day, hindsight's a wicked thing, but I was just like, right, I've got to go back because I left and I shouldn't have left, but 6 hours I need to eat. And basically I had a slow rupture. And the doctor, it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon or evening, the doctor was just like, look, we've got a team and it's a slow rupture, which means we can see what we're doing, because most people, when it comes to rupture, it's like
Gushing with
they've got to
blood,
go
so you can't
fast,
see anything.
gushing. And so I was very, very lucky. But yeah, I had to have the operation.
Okay, so is that
laparoscopy?
So you lost that tube?
They try and save it if they can, but I had said to them I want them to remove it because most of my pregnancies before that, if not all of them, I felt it in my right side. So intuitively, I realised that actually I've always been having ectopic pregnancies, but ectopic pregnancies can naturally miscarry as well as having this medical intervention. So
never heard of methotrexate. That's really interesting because I've heard of like misoprostol and those ones that are more acting on hormones, but this is about folic acid. So it's a cancer treatment that they're repurposing. And is it primarily used for ectopics as opposed to just miscarriage, just to induce miscarriage or to terminate?
Yeah. And there's a particular dose. So obviously the dose you have cancer is it's very mild, but the main side effect is that it completely reduces your folic acid. Well, they say that, but so
did they say that a slow rupture could happen with methotrexate, or was that shocking to them, shocking to you, or is it quite a common occurrence?
What they said was methotrexate has like an 80-90% chance. They gave me percentages of how well it works, but there's this small percentage. They focused on the small percentage. So you obviously psychologically you decide that okay, this is going to work. And what they said just didn't happen. I had to have not one but 2 shots of it. I did my research in terms of what the shots were and what happens, what is being put into my body. It just didn't feel right at all. It was awful, absolutely awful. And I was really frustrated in myself, if I'm honest with you, that I had it once, but then I had it twice. And then originally,
I guess it's
I said,
when you've started, you kind of are on that train.
You're on that
now,
train. You are literally, yes, thank you. You're on that train. And it's not that you don't care, but I was like done. I was exhausted. I was still going to work as well. I only told them, one of my colleagues at work, I think about 4 days before the rupture.
Mhm.
And I've been going through it for about 3.5 weeks, going to meetings and, not, acting normal, but keeping it together actually, because your emotions are there. You're trying to be strong. Partner was strong enough, but he was, concerned, worried. And I think when it's happening to you, you can't explain it to a person. Do you know what I mean? Like when the emotions got too much, when I actually became really vulnerable, and that was sort of after it, like after the operation, that's when I realized the extent of what I was going through and what I was told. And I don't think the care was terrible. I just don't think they gave enough. There wasn't enough support for me to make a decision. I had to literally consult my tarot, roll the dice type thing about the decision I would make. I literally focused on my holistic practices to actually help me come to a decision, connect with pregnancy as well, because I tell you again, I think the baby was a boy, a strong boy, as in, nothing, no drug is going to stop me from growing, but it was just not in
the wrong
right place.
Yeah, heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So that was obviously a very medicalized experience that time.
Super,
did you still have some kind of psychic communication or resolution, or was it all just like medical terminology and knowing via medical procedures whether it was finished or not?
I mean, medically, HCG levels went down, the pain stopped. Obviously, they removed pregnancy. I didn't connect with this pregnancy as much as I did with my previous one at the time. It was more so, it was this throbbing. It was like, I don't know, it wasn't pain. It was like someone telling me I'm there, if that makes sense. So there was a connection, because there was a real willing for this to be. I just, even knowing it was almost almost realizing where it was. I remember my mom saying to me, "Oh, I've heard that they can grow in the fallopian tube, but miraculously move to the uterus." So I spent a week working on my body to try and get it to move in to the right location. And this Facebook group I was telling you about, there were stories of that, or do you know what I mean? Stories of
there's always a chance.
Them taking methotrexate as well, but some birthers actually being pregnant with twins, and the twins are in two completely different locations. Or with methotrexate, if you're pregnant with twins, methotrexate will only usually work in aborting one of those pregnancies. So you can find that you're pregnant, and people have gone to have very healthy children, but obviously it needs to be monitored if that is the case. So these are the things that I was holding on to. So no, I didn't really connect. But one of the things that we decided to do is, when they got rid of the fallopian tube in pregnancy, I had said to the hospital, "You get rid of it." But the moment I woke up, I actually did Reiki on myself, and it was one of the most powerful Reiki sessions I've done on myself, because I felt the energy flood through me, like completely heal me. Like I've gone through such a intrusive operation, but also something that's actually taken a part of my body. And something in me just said, "No, I've got to stop them from just getting rid of the pregnancy." So I actually have elected to do that myself. So I now have pregnancy and baby in a box, and
interesting.
I'm going to, and that's an option that you have, and I'm going to figure out, still trying to figure that out, a spiritual sort of ceremony, to almost like what you would do with the placenta, to say goodbye and to bless it. And I just thought there's something about my part of my body just being burnt by the hospital, where actually I need to figure out where that goes, And there was there's a podcast I listened to, about a year ago, where every pregnancy, like part of the baby, whether you give birth or you miscarry, part of the DNA for that child stays with you. So there was just something where I was just like, I've got to keep the control.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, I've heard that it can stay for like 18 years, but I don't know if it goes to term and results in a live birth, actually. Because yeah, you'd have a lot of insane DNA floating around in you.
Just got every child. There's an imprint. There's a footprint.
Wow. So you've told us quite a lot about the very medicalized version. Would you care to tell us more about the less medical versions and the difference, and what made you, like, were you frightened to opt out and do it alone, or was it very clear that this was actually doable and it would result in, you wouldn't be harmed?
I think I'd probably have to go back to the most earliest one because I just didn't know what that was. But I didn't know what I was experiencing when I was having that miscarriage. Like 2 days, I was bleeding a lot, and like I say, I couldn't walk. I was crawling along the floor. I just knew. I don't know. It was completely intuitive. I knew when I needed to eat. I knew when I needed to drink. I didn't know I was having in my family, my mum and my grandmother have had hysterectomies because they've just had really bad periods. So and it was at a similar age to me, sort of mid-20s. So I just thought this was the start of that. So I just held on to my strength and my intuition and knowing and just listening to my body. And like I say, it was like birthing because it just stopped. There was literally a moment at 9 o'clock the first night, and I'd gone through it. I must have got home from my friend's party at about midday, and I was literally doing it all. I can't explain it to you, but I started breathing in pattern with what you would call surges if you're giving birth. And I was able to calm myself down, obviously cook the food, eat the food, and through that the pain subsided. And then after I'd eaten, it kicked up. 9 o'clock, it stopped. I went to sleep, and I couldn't believe it. Like 9-10 o'clock the next day, started again, and I sat on the toilet. And almost similar to when you give birth, sometimes you sit on the toilet to get your body into a particular position. I did that, and I did that for probably about 2 hours. And then when I saw what I saw, it was like, okay, this is a bit weird. And you know what, that miscarriage, I was giving birth, wasn't I? Basically.
Yeah.
And what was really sad is I took it out of the toilet. I remember this. Didn't know what the hell I was looking at to then flush it. I remember that. It took me a while. And then about an hour later, one of my flatmates came and just said, yeah, I think you've had a miscarriage. And I think if she'd have come an hour or two before, it would have been a completely different story. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't even know. I'd say I was 3 months, but I could have been even further gone. I just, But
similar to birth, it's like you needed and deserved somebody there who is a professional in that they understand what's going on and they are knowledgeable, but isn't a professional in that they're going to like want to medicalize you and micromanage it. And yeah, it's similar to birth. It's like we ought to be training, or not training, just everybody should have some understanding and knowledge of this, how this can happen and what you can do to support a woman when it is happening. I cook for her rather than make her cook on her knees.
Yeah, exactly.
Bless you. I have never done it, but I'm told that you can order like certain drugs, misoprostol particularly, online, certainly in America. Were you ever tempted to just like acquire what you needed, or even try natural versions of those drugs and just self-administer and complete the procedure like at home or in the place of your choosing?
No,
do you think that
never.
should be an option or more accessible for people?
Look, it's a hard one. It's a really hard one. I think it really does depend on a person's circumstances. I think it's a beautiful thing to bring life into this world, but I think circumstances can mean that you're just not in a position to do that. If it was me, no. But I have experiences of clients and friends where they have chosen to go with sort of medical intervention to approach a clinic to use it. Ordering it online, I think it gives a little bit too much. It becomes a little bit too much available. It becomes too available to people if they decide that they've made the wrong decision.
I see what you mean. It's kind
So
of
it gives
the barriers
power,
to entry are too low,
freedom,
and then you might.
but the barrier is your GP, is the professional in the, like putting my fingers up, but it's somebody to ask you, to consult with you, to say, are you sure you're making the right decision? You know, I have a sibling who's pregnant at a very young age, and you know, everyone was like, no, you shouldn't have a child. Wanted it, and then later down the line, literally a few months, and she was quite far gone. She was just like, I've got to do it. But she made the decision, if that makes sense, and she had time to think about it. It was a little bit later than she would have wanted to. That's a really hard question, because your question is, should it be available online for people to just order it like you're ordering something off Amazon? Then I don't think so. I do think you need to have support of a doula, of somebody that is holistically, intuitively connected, able to help you sort of deep dive into why you're going to do this.
Yeah,
and that could be a nurse sensible. Or a doctor as well, but I think there just needs to be something in the way of the decision.
Yeah, just to give you pause to reflect and make the right choice for you.
Because that sibling I talk about, there's regret from that decision. Do you know what I mean? Now,
so it's not so much on a health or potential for harm of taking the drug unsupervised, but it's more that the decision to take the drug.
You just need somebody to talk to. When I think about the methotrexate, I didn't have anyone. Do you know what I mean? I had myself, knowing, because of my experience, because of being a doula, I was able to research, or do you know what I mean, or talk to be a part of the right groups. But there's a lot of people that wouldn't have been able to do that. They'd have just been like, okay, I trust you, I'm going to take it. I didn't take the drug because they told me to. I took the drug because I thought it through, and I decided that this was the option. It wasn't the option I wanted, but it was the option that I needed to move forward, to not have to go in every other day and take blood tests. And do you know what I mean? It was like almost like enough is enough. I had to.
Sure. Oh, thank you so much. It's been a great chat. I would like to just I was looking at the red mooner and white mooner, wasn't I? And I didn't actually get around to explaining that. So let me do that before we say goodbye. And try and get it right as well, because it always confuses me. So you can have your cycle anytime in the moon phases, but often a woman is either a red mooner or a new mooner or a white mooner. So the white moon cycle is when you menstruate. Hang on, try and get it right. So a white moon is when you menstruate with the new moon. So we recently had did we just have new moon?
Interesting.
We just had new moon. No, we just had full moon, didn't we? So
new moon's coming.
So the next new moon is going to be in Capricorn on the 23rd of December. So if you happen to menstruate then, you're what's called a white moon cycler.
I'm just about to look at my cycle.
Have a little look. They
25th.
Okay, so you're a white moon cycler. We have it here.
All right, I'm writing it down. Yeah.
Tell the internet.
Right.
And whereas somebody who has their period at the full moon is what's called a red moon cycler. And so a white moon cycler is more to do with, hang on. Yeah, more to do with fertility and childbearing, whereas the red moon cyclers are more to do with like the collective and kind of mothering the world as opposed to mothering one individual infant. So
interesting. Right, I'm going to do my research on that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And but obviously, yeah, you may just fall randomly in the middle of the moon cycle and not be either of those. But yeah, it sounds like you might be a night mooner. You're welcome, and thank you so much for sharing. And I hope it wasn't too upsetting to relive it all, and just be gentle with yourself this afternoon or this evening.
Thank you. It's been super cathartic, actually. A few things that come up, which
good.
I actually just thought.
I think we are much stronger than maybe we're given credit for, and actually, you know, death is a part of life, isn't it? And loss is a part of life. So you can't be too upset because we have so much that's wonderful and that we're thankful for. So I hope you feel that. All right, Genelva, thank you so much. Talk soon.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.